Alright, everybody, welcome back to Major Movies and TV, and today we're going to be talking about the new horror movie that came out recently called Barbarian, starring Bill Skarsgård, Georgina Campbell, Justin Long, and Matthew Patrick Davis, and it was directed by Zach Kreger. And this movie was good. I'm going to do a non-spoiler review, and then I'll get into spoilers, and I'll let you know when I'm about to get into spoilers. When it comes to non-spoilers, I will say that the acting in this movie is well done. All the characters are believable. The writing for the characters is good. Like, there wasn't anything that was super cringy or weird or annoying in the writing. Like, the characters didn't do anything dumb. There was comedy mixed in with the horror in this movie that was very well done, especially when it came to Justin Long's character. But it was also a very tense movie. You kind of don't expect, what's going to happen. It's very out there and very, you just don't understand. You don't expect what happens in this movie to happen. I'll tell you that much. You kind of get an idea from the trailer if you watch the trailer, but honestly, if you didn't watch the trailer, you're going to be completely 100% surprised by everything that happens in this movie. And it's a very different movie. It's shot differently. Like the structure of the story, maybe not shot differently, but the structure of the story is very weird because there seems to be like 3 parts to the movie, but you can like tell exactly when the parts change, Like, it's like some movies, the 3 parts all mixed together, but this one, for some reason, every time the part changes, there's a jump cut into it. It's funny. It's very unexpected, and it's a weird way to do a movie, but it works for this movie. And the characters are all believable. They all are portrayed well. I would like to say that they have an arc, but honestly, the unfortunate thing is, this is a negative about the movie. It doesn't feel like the characters really have a real arc to them. And that's like the biggest negative about this movie, is that it feels inconsequential at the end. It feels like there wasn't really a point. It was just a series of events that happened, and then by the end of the movie, they're just over. And I'll get more into why in spoilers, but that is honestly the biggest negative about this movie. It doesn't feel like there was a lesson or an arc or anything. It just feels like events that happen, and you enjoy the events as they happen. They're tense. There's comedy. There's tension. There's, you feel for these characters, but that's all that happens, is that things happens to these characters. You feel bad for these characters. You kind of learn a little bit about the area they're in and the story behind the area they're in. But other than that, the characters themselves don't have an arc to it. They don't have a history. They don't have like a lesson or anything, because the characters, 2 of the characters start out as solid characters. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. They don't have flaws. They're just people that exist. And then we get a 3rd character that does have flaws and stuff, but even then, that character doesn't learn anything by the end of the movie. So you have essentially 3 main characters, 2 of which don't have a story because they don't need to learn anything. They don't need to go through any sort of arc because there's nothing really wrong with them. And then you have another character who has sort of the start of an arc. You know, there are things that they've done, they have flaws, but they don't learn from their flaws by the end of the movie, and then the end of the movie happens and there's no closure to their story. So unless they plan on doing some sort of sequel or prequel or something with this movie that kind of continues the story, these characters don't have real arcs. They just don't. One of them kind of has the start of an arc, but then it's dropped and then that's it. So if you're okay with not needing an arc for your characters, if you don't need them to overcome something within themselves, and you just want to see them fight against a force that they don't understand, then, you know, this movie is probably very good for you. But if you expect your characters to have some sort of a lesson that they need to learn, or if you like flawed characters, this movie isn't really for you that much. Even the only flawed character in this movie doesn't get redemption. They don't. So that is the biggest negative of this movie. And probably the only negative, because the movie's well shot. There's nothing, the CGI or whatever, the practical effects, they look good. The acting is well done. And the story, for the most part, is well written, other than the characters don't have an arc. You know? So, if that sounds good to you, if you want to watch a weird movie that might disturb you a bit and get you kind of freaked out, and that's it, like a turn your brain off kind of movie, then yeah, I think that'd be a good movie for you. Barbarian. I think it's on HBO Max right now, so if you have HBO Max, you can watch it, and I do recommend it. You know, just know what you're getting into before you watch it. But like I said, Georgina Campbell pretty much carries the movie. She does very well in her role. And then Justin Long and Bill Skarsgård also do well in their roles. It's just, there isn't enough to their characters. Alright, so that's pretty much all I can say without going too much into non-spoiler stuff. I want to talk about spoilers because this movie, you really need to talk about spoilers in order to give a full review. So, as of right now, I'm going into spoilers. If you don't want to be spoiled, don't keep watching. Go watch the movie on Netflix, or even, not Netflix, HBO Max, or go watch the movie in theaters. But at this point, I'm going into spoilers. Final warning, 3, 2, 1, spoiler time. Alright, so the movie starts out with Georgina Campbell's character, Tess. And Tess shows up to this B&B in Michigan at night. She shows up to her Airbnb. It's in Michigan, and then she shows up, and then Bill Skarsgård is in the Airbnb already. And Bill Skarsgård's character's named Keith. I keep thinking of him just as Bill Skarsgård, but no, his name is Keith. The character's Keith. So Tess and Keith are both like, well, this is awkward. They were both given the Airbnb for the same time. They both ordered it, or whatever you call it, rented it out for the same days. So, at this point, they are kind of awkward with each other. Tess doesn't trust him. She thinks, she doesn't verbally say it or act like he's gonna do something wrong, but she's also super safe about it. And that's part of why these characters at the beginning don't have an arc, because they already know what to do. Like, Tess is already smart about things. She already knows, hey, don't just drink things from this guy. Don't just, like, trust him right off the bat. Don't just be okay with what's going on. And then Keith himself, he's like, alright, I know I'm not a bad guy. I don't know how to handle this situation, but I'm going to try to make Tess as comfortable as possible. They end up staying the night together. They end up, just sharing the B&B. And he's a little awkward. He doesn't necessarily know how to deal with the situation. But he's also not a bad person. He doesn't attack Tess. He is a good guy throughout his, thing. He's naive, a little awkward, but overall a good person that is not trying to hurt Tess. So, they stay the night, they have some fun together, they talk. Turns out they have some stuff in common with Tess is getting a job doing something with some writer, and then turns out Keith knows that writer or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but they have stuff in common. And then there is a scene where Keith is, he's trying to offer her like wine to drink, but he also doesn't want to make her uncomfortable, so he's just kind of sitting there. He's like, I figured it would be best for me to open this in front of you because you didn't want to drink the tea, and I totally understand why you wouldn't want to drink the tea, so I just figured maybe if you wanted wine, it would be best for me not to open it before you got here, so you don't think I did anything to it. You could see me open it, or you can open it yourself. And he's just kind of going off, and I get that, he's not a bad guy. He's just awkward, and he doesn't know how to deal with this situation. So yeah, and he gets the sheets washed for her. He does a lot of things. He does play a little bit too much into the nice guy thing, but he's not doing it for the wrong reasons. He's genuinely trying to be nice, but he's overcompensating a little bit for the situation at hand. But he in the end is not a bad guy. He does not hurt Tess. So what happens is, after Tess's interview, she the next day. Well, actually, let's talk about the night before. So the night before, when Tess goes to sleep, they make a thing within the movie to show that every time Tess closes a door, she locks it. But she didn't lock her bedroom door. And then at night, something comes upstairs, opens her door, and then runs away when she wakes up or something like that. And then she sees Keith on the couch, and he's sleeping, and she thinks he opened the door. He's like, no, I didn't open the door, I was sleeping. And so now that's the first sign that something weird is going on, but they go back to sleep. And the next day, Tess goes for her interview, and she realizes after, the sun comes out and she can see everything, that the neighborhood around her is pretty much destroyed. Like, no one lives there. This house that they have, which is kind of weird because it's a decent house, but every other house around it is completely destroyed, demolished. Like, no one lives in this town other than them. So she notices this, and then the person who interviews her says that the town isn't safe, and there was a lot of dangerous stuff that happens there. And then what happens is she comes back from the interview, and then this random homeless guy starts running at her, and he's like, oh, girl, stop, I gotta tell you, don't go in there, it's dangerous. And then obviously she gets scared, runs inside, and then locks the door behind her, and the hobo disappears. Now you learn that the hobo was correct and was genuinely just trying to help her, but his way of doing it was absolutely horrible. So, he's still a crazy hobo who really should not have been trying to get her attention like that. But, it is what it is. So she goes back inside, and then what happens is she runs out of toilet paper, so she goes down to the basement to get some, and the door to the basement, for some reason, swings closed. If you leave it open, it'll swing closed and lock. Now, I don't know how this works. I don't understand a house like this where a door can just close and then lock itself. That's kind of, bad. But she ends up locked in the basement. While she's locked in the basement, she ends up finding this hidden door to a tunnel. It's in the concrete wall of the basement. She pulls a rope. The rope opens the door. So I'm like, alright. And one thing I don't understand is why didn't she try to kick down the door? I know it's not her house, but she is locked in this basement. She is in an unsafe situation. She could have kicked down the door or knocked it down or something like that. But that's beyond me, She didn't even try to kick down the door. She could have done that. But anyway, she goes down this tunnel. And when she goes down the tunnel, she finds this room with a dirty bed, a bucket, and a camera. And I'm like, okay. This got weird fast. So, after she finds the weird bucket room, she eventually sees Keith outside trying to get in because she has the key, so he can't get in, and then she's banging on this basement window. She's like, hey, and then eventually he gets her out through the window, and she's able to get outside, and then she tells him, she's like, there's this weird room down in the basement, and I need to get out of here. I'm leaving. I'm not dealing with this. And then, for some reason, Keith, now, throughout the movie, there's this subtle message about how men and women have to deal with situations differently. And she mentions how men are able to just kind of walk into a situation and not be as scared as a woman. And then Keith also brings up the point that he's also, in this situation with him and her, he doesn't know how to handle the situation correctly. So it's also nerve-wracking for him. And it's kind of like the perspective of men and women in different situations. Now, in this situation, the woman sees it as, okay, there's a dirty bed, a weird camera, and a bucket in a room behind a closed door. I am out. I do not trust this. This is bad. And then Keith is like, well, I didn't see this thing. I'm not just going to leave with you because I didn't even see this room. I don't know what's going on. And I kind of get that because in his head, Tess could be lying just to get him out of the house to, kidnap him or something. I don't know. But, so I get it. But I'm also like, he could have listened better, maybe called the cops or something, been like, hey, we found this really weird room in this house, and we're kind of worried about it. Do you think you could come check it out? Something like that. But instead, Keith decides to go down to the basement and check it out for himself. When he goes down there, Tess notices that the door is going to swing closed and lock him in, just like it locked her in. So she puts a chair in front of the door, which again, these characters aren't completely stupid. So by the time we get to the end of the movie, there's not a whole lot that they need to learn, which is kind of one of the downfalls of the movie. But, so Keith ends up finding another hidden door at the end of this tunnel, and it leads to an even longer tunnel, an even farther down tunnel. Apparently this house has a military bunker underneath it or something, because this tunnel it's like a mine shaft. I'm like, okay. So Keith ends up getting lost down there or something, and then Tess goes down there with him to figure out what's going on. Tess finds him. He's freaking out. He's like, "Oh my god, I've been bitten. Something bit me." And then she's like, "Oh no, we gotta go back." And then he's like, "No, we can't go that way. She's down there. She's down there." And then so they go the other way, and then she's right there. So obviously Keith had no idea what he was talking about, because if they would have left the right way out of the tunnel, they would have gotten out. But Keith is freaked out, so he goes the other way, and guess who's right there? This giant naked lady, like saggy old weird naked lady. Now, super feral. And she's just essentially this giant monster. Now, this lady is human, she's not supernatural, she's not a monster, she's not anything like that. She is a human, and you learn this by the end of the movie, but for some reason, she's like 6 feet tall and has superhuman strength. She's essentially Leatherface of this movie, in female form, only even more feral than Leatherface. At least Leatherface wore clothes and kind of understood some stuff. He understood how to work a chainsaw. She is completely feral, has no humanity in her, and she's ginormous, okay? And she grabs Keith's head and just slams him up against the wall a bunch of times and crushes his head, and he dies. And so that's part of what happens with these characters not having a real arc. Keith did not learn anything. He did not change any flaws in himself between the time that he appeared and the time he died. There was nothing. He left the world the same way he came into the movie. Okay, he was the exact same. So there was no arc for that character at all. You can kind of maybe say Tess and Justin Long's character have arcs, but even then theirs aren't realized. This movie is a bunch of things happening to these characters, and you feel bad for the characters, but these characters are essentially just normal people. And if you're okay with that, you'll still love this movie. I did like this movie. I didn't have an issue with it, but I just noticed that these characters don't have real arcs to them, which is a little odd. If you're kind of expecting your characters to have some sort of flaws, you're not getting that here. But so that happens, and then it jump cuts, and this is where I'm talking about how the movie really does it differently with how it's structured, because it just jump cuts to the second act. It jump cuts to Justin Long's character AJ, and he's just driving his car singing a song in the sun. There's in LA, I think he's in, or California, and he is just singing along like nothing happened. Right after Keith died, it just jump cuts. And then now we're following Justin Long's character AJ. Now, AJ apparently is some sort of actor or film star or something, and he's got money. He's pretty rich. Well, I wouldn't say rich, but he has enough money to be considered wealthy. And so he's driving his car, and while he's driving his car, he gets a call from the people running this show that he's supposed to be on. Now, these people tell him that the co-star of the show, this female character, has brought up allegations against him of, sexual assault. And he's like, I didn't do that. He's like, I don't know what you mean. I didn't mean to, I didn't rape her or anything. But they're saying that, a story is going to be put out about him, and that some criminal charges could be, given. And it's like his attorney and whatnot. And he's freaking out. He's like, I didn't do anything. He honestly believes that he did not do anything to her. And we get kind of more context later on, but what happens is he needs to he's filing a lawsuit against her for defamation, and he is going to try and also put charges against her or something like that. So he needs money. And turns out he is the owner of the house in Michigan where Tess and Keith were staying, where they got double booked. Booked, that's what it's called. So he goes to that house in order to sell it to make some money. And when he gets there, he sees Tess and Keith's stuff still in the house. And he calls, he's like, what's going on? Why are these people still in my house? I don't understand. And they said that they were supposed to check out weeks ago. And, yeah, so this happens. He is staying in the house, and he gets a call from his parents. His parents live in Michigan, and they're like, oh, are we going to be able to see you? And he's like, oh, when are you and they're like, when are you going to be able to fly out here? And this is where you kind of learn that he's a shithead, because they're like, oh, when are you going to be able to fly out to Michigan? It's only a couple hours, and he's in Michigan, but he's like, oh, I don't know. And then he just kind of says bye and hangs up the phone. And then his friend calls him from Michigan, and he's like, what's up? And again, shithead, because he says, he goes, what's up, faggot? I'm like, oh, God. Yeah. And I don't care if y'all want to freaking cancel me for saying it. That's what he said in the damn movie. Okay, chill. I didn't say it. Just chill. That's what he says in the movie. So, he goes out with his friend, he gets drunk, and he's kind of telling his friend what happened a little bit, because he's drunk. And he's like, no, I didn't force myself on her. She said no at first, but then she just took some convincing, and then we ended up doing it. And in my mind, alright, so there is never any more details about the situation he's in. None. That is the last we hear about the situation itself. And in my mind, this movie makes you want to think that Justin Long's character, AJ, is a shithead or a bad person. And in all reality, like, if you think about it logically here, they don't give enough context to really make you believe that he actually raped this woman. Now, like, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, alright, so I don't understand, like, if she said no at first, and then he kept talking to her, and all it was he just talked to her. He just was talking to her, one thing led to another, and then she ended up agreeing later on. That's not rape. That's her changing her mind, and then allowing him to, do that. So, not rape, but, have sex. So, I'm like, alright, so what type of convincing was there? Because that context really is the deciding factor of whether or not I'm not supposed to like this character. But there is no more context given. Apparently, he convinced her somehow. Now, if all he did was talk to her, that's not his fault. If he just talked to her, and then she ended up agreeing later on, that's not his fault. But if his version of convincing was him yelling at her, or, making her feel bad, or pressuring her into doing it when she keeps saying no, then yes, that is sexual assault, or something along those lines. But they don't give enough context to really decide whether or not he's in the wrong or not. They don't tell you. They kind of make you have to assume the worst about him. When he says it, the movie wants you to assume the worst. The movie wants you to assume that he really hardcore pressured her. But in all reality, he could have just kept talking to her. Like I can picture, like, he says, hey, and tries. She says no. They keep talking. Things change over time, and then she does it. Like, that isn't his fault. But then, him being verbally or mentally abusive towards her to get her to do it, yes, that is his fault, and then he's a shit person. So I wish they gave more context to the situation. That's all. If I'm supposed to hate this character, let me hate this character. Let me realize what the problem is with this dude. But they didn't. They didn't give enough context for me personally to just automatically assume that he's the worst type of guy possible. But that's just me. So Justin Long, his character, AJ, is staying in a house, and then eventually he goes down to the basement too. Because he's, finding out the square footage of the house so he could sell it. He finds the secret room, and his reaction to finding this secret tunnel is, oh, I wonder if this can count towards square footage of the house. And then he goes on Google, he's like, oh, this tunnel could be considered square footage, possibly. And then he literally is taking a tape measure and he's just running it down the tunnel and he goes into the room with the camera and the bucket and everything, and then he's like, he just moves everything out of the way and he measures the room like it's nothing. He's just completely oblivious to anything weird that could possibly be going on with this. And then he finds the other door to the deeper tunnel and he's like, oh, this is great. Even more tunnel. So he just keeps going down with the tape measure. I'm like, all right, this is funny. His character is the comedic relief in this movie, despite possibly being a shithead. So he keeps going, and in this tunnel there are like cages with like dog bowls in them. Okay, like, this is not a nice tunnel. It's a mine shaft with a bunch of weird shit in it. So he keeps going. And then eventually he like kind of hears the woman, the crazy woman, and then he falls into her cage in the floor. Okay, there's like this big hole in the ground with a cage on top of it, where Tess is. So Tess is in the hole and he's freaking out. And then the woman goes up to the hole in the ground with a giant baby bottle. Now, this baby bottle is huge, so I don't know where she got this baby bottle. It's covered in hair, and it's disgusting. I'm like, oh, God, that is just the worst thing ever, is when things are covered in hair for me. It's, God. So Tess explains to him that this crazy lady in this tunnel here essentially just wants to make them her baby. Like, she wants them to be her children, essentially. So she drinks from the nasty baby bottle thing that she reaches down in there, and then she comes down into the tunnel, and because AJ won't drink from the bottle, he's freaking out. And then she grabs him and then pulls him up out of the tunnel. Well, when she does that, that gives Tess the ability to escape. And then she climbs out of the hole and starts walking down the tunnel. Now, in one of the rooms in this tunnel, it's essentially just this room with this one little TV that keeps playing this video about breastfeeding. And then it's got like bedding on the ground and stuff. So the crazy lady takes AJ to the room with the bedding on the ground and forcibly tries to breastfeed him. And obviously that doesn't work out too well, but she keeps doing it because she's mentally unstable. So Tess is able to get past her. She's able to get out of the tunnel. She's running out of the tunnel, and then the crazy lady notices, and she starts chasing her through the tunnel. And then Tess is able to smash in that window that she got out of before. She crawls out the window with the crazy lady chasing after her. And then the the hobo dude is there, and he kind of like leads her away, and he tells her, he's like, you gotta get out of here, because that lady's gonna come out of that house at night, and she's gonna go after you. You know, she's gonna come out. And so what she does is she finds a phone, and she calls the police, because AJ is still trapped in that tunnel. Now, AJ, because the lady left the lady left him in that room, he's able to travel farther down the tunnel. And when he travels down the tunnel, he finds this last room at the end of the tunnel. And in that room is this character named Frank, played by Richard Brake. And we are going to talk about this character because, oh God, he is disturbing. He is a very disturbing character, completely disgusting. One of the worst characters in a horror movie that I've seen. I prefer Jigsaw over this dude. You know, Jigsaw is less messed up than this dude. Okay, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit. So Tess is able to call the cops, and the cops are completely useless. Now, I'm happy that the cops weren't overly aggressive, but they didn't believe Tess because she looks like a druggie. And this is a part of the city or whatever that's completely destroyed, and they assume that she's on drugs. Because she's saying that there's a tunnel in this house and she was imprisoned there and everything. Now, this is a big point as to why, when I see people yelling about defunding police, okay, this is why. This is a perfect explanation as to why that is a horrible idea. Okay? Throughout the movie, she has called the police before, but they told her literally they did not have enough officers to help her. Okay? And then, when these police come, they get a call about another thing, and they're like, alright, we can't deal with this. We need to leave. And then they just leave her, not believing her, and they just seem like they can't take the time to actually investigate this thing. They just can't believe her. They have to leave. And then, so, in my mind, I'm like, yes, let's defund the police so they can be like in Michigan in this movie where they literally cannot help you, you know? But say you have to deal with this situation yourself now. You possibly have to kill someone. You kill that person, okay? Then all of a sudden the police are here like, oh, why'd you kill that person? You know, then you're getting arrested. So it's this horrible thing where, yeah, defunding the police is a horrible idea. No matter where it happens, the crime rate goes up after it happens. Minneapolis, Michigan, all these freaking Chicago. Okay, it's a bad idea. It's not a good idea at all. Okay, there are other ways to fix problems with the police system. Defunding them is not the right way. If anything, they should be given a little more money so that they could get proper training. They can actually have time and resources to go after these smaller complaints, you know, because if they had the time, they might have, you know, been more willing to believe her and go and investigate. But apparently they don't have the time or resources. But that's my rant, you know. That's my rant on that. The police were annoying, they were assholes, but they weren't overly aggressive. They weren't, you know, trying to attack her or anything. They just didn't believe her. So now she has to go in and try to save AJ herself. So she starts going back into the tunnel. While she is searching for AJ, we cut to years before, where the town isn't destroyed. The town is like nice. It's like this little suburban town with people living there, and everyone is kind of normal. And then you have this guy, Frank. And it shows Frank leaving his house. Now, he's not normal. You can tell he talks like someone who doesn't care about human beings. Okay, like he's so deadpan and nasty sounding just with the way he talks. So he does that, and he drives off, and he goes to a store, and then he's looking for diapers and anything that can help with a home birth. Now, as an audience member, you could tell right away that something is wrong with this dude, and that the situation he's explaining is very off, and he has no idea what he's talking about, but he just needs supplies. And he's talking to this worker at this store, and if I was a worker at this store, I'd be calling the police and being like, yo, this dude's weird, he's asking for a lot of weird stuff, can you investigate this, please? And maybe if he did, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. If she did, he wouldn't have been able to hurt so many women. But, people were very nice back then. They like to believe the best in people. Nowadays, no. I do not believe the best in anyone. Anyone can be a freaking psychopath. So, no, I do not trust people. I'm just going to say that. I do not see the best in people all the time. Not unless after months and months of knowing them. Okay, but that's beside the point. The worker gives him all the stuff. He goes back to his place, and he's following this neighbor lady. And the lady, she lives down the street from him. And what he does is he puts on this outfit that he somehow got, and he goes up to her door, and he's like, "Oh, I'm with some sort of company that deals with stuff." And he's just, I just need to check your house for a minute. So she lets him in, and then he goes to the bathroom, turns on the water, and then breaks the lock on her window with his bare hand. I'm like, okay. And then he just turns the water off and leaves. He's like, oh, everything's all good. And then you can kind of assume what happens after she gets kidnapped and trapped in his weird tunnel of death. So, yeah, then, this dude Frank is disgusting, obviously. He's very, very gross. He makes me not want to be alive, knowing that people like that exist in this world. So that's kind of what happens there. And then you cut back to him years later, and AJ has found him. He's pretty much sick to death. He's like dying in this tunnel. He's malnourished and disgusting, and he's in this bed. And AJ finds him, and he doesn't, think that he's this disgusting human being. He just sees some old dude trapped in his tunnel and thinks that the crazy lady had him trapped in there. So AJ, is trying to help him, and he brings his desk over to him so he could get some water. But then AJ is looking around the room, and he sees these videotapes. And oh God, the videotapes. On the videotapes are tapes with names on them. Sometimes not even names. It says like Melissa, and then one says Redhead from Garage or gas station or whatever, and then some say like Puker. I'm like, oh God, I want to kill this man. And then AJ watches a tape, and luckily you don't see the tape. You don't see anything happen in this movie, but all you hear is like screams from the tape. And then AJ looks at me, he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you do this? This is disgusting. You're fucking horrible. And I'm like, all right, thank you, AJ, for pointing that out. And then the dude, Frank, he just pulls out a gun from his desk and shoots himself. So now he's dead. And AJ's like, oh God. And then, so AJ is able to grab his gun, and then he's walking through the tunnel. And then Tess is also walking through the tunnel trying to save him. And Tess is walking through the tunnel. She sees a light. She's like, oh, what's that? And then AJ just shoots her. Obviously he didn't realize that she was, her, but he just shoots her, and now she's shot. So he's like, all right, well, I gotta get you out of here. So he picks her up, he brings her out, and they are able to escape. There is one part where she gets into Oh, so alright, my bad. This happens before Tess saves him, but Tess is able to drive her car into the crazy lady because the crazy lady actually comes out of the house and she like slams her car into her and pins her up against the house. And then by the time they get out of the tunnel with AJ, she's gone. And then she's like, oh God, she's gone. Where'd she go? So at that point, the hobo guy finds them, or they find the hobo guy because he said he lived at the water tower. So they go to the water tower and they talk to him, and he pretty much explains that this dude was kidnapping and raping women and then having kids with the daughters of the raped women and then having kids with those daughters, and it was a vicious, horrible cycle, and that this crazy lady in this tunnel is essentially just a incest bred frickin' monstrosity because, and with no human contact because she was forced to live in a tunnel for so long. So you do kind of feel bad for the monster of this movie because she's really not a monster. She's just this feral human being that was given a horrible life. So that aspect of the movie is very well done, and honestly, the main monster of the movie kind of has more of an arc than any of the three other characters, because Tess at this point has done nothing wrong. She has no flaws. You know, she has tried her best to be a good person, and she has tried her best to do everything right, and she's just getting destroyed because of it. And then Keith is dead, and before anything even happened. And now we have AJ, who is kind of learning something, but by the end of the movie, you realize he didn't learn anything. And then he dies. And we're going to get to that. So the monster kind of has the biggest arc in a movie, because you kind of realize, oh, this is not a monster. She is just a very messed up woman. So, you know, but that's another thing, too, is, like, she's, like, I get it, you know, maybe years of inbreeding or whatever can cause birth defects and then maybe make people stronger than average. But this lady is huge. She's, like, 7 feet tall, and she's just smashing through people with her bare hands. I'm like, yo, she's surviving getting hit with a car. I'm like, Leatherface was never on this level. Like, jeez. But I guess you gotta suspend disbelief a little bit. But then, so Tess, AJ, and the hobo are in the hobo's home. And this was kind of a funny part in the movie, I guess, like, dark humor. But the hobo dude is like, I've lived here 15 years and she's never come over here. Because I asked him, you know, like, how do you know that she's not going to find you over here at this water tower? He's like, I lived here 15 years. And then all of a sudden she breaks through the wall of his little hut, takes him, rips his arm off, and then beats him with it. I'm like, okay, just out of nowhere. I was like, all right, that's crazy. So AJ and Tess are running away. They run up to the top of the water tower, and Tess is like lagging behind him, obviously, because she got shot and he's not helping her. So they get to the top of the water tower, and then the lady is also climbing up to the top of the water tower. And AJ, again, this is like dark humor. This is just ridiculous. He literally grabs Tess, and he's like, we just gotta, you know, she's gonna go after you, and then throws her off the water tower. And then the crazy monster lady, jumps off the water tower after Tess. And I don't know how this happened, but it ended up to where Tess ended up on top of the mother crazy lady, and then they both land on the ground, and Tess is still alive because she landed on the crazy lady. I'm like, okay, I don't know how that happened, but, you know, you do you, movie. Then AJ runs down to the bottom. He checks to see if they're still alive. He realizes Tess is alive. He's like, "Oh, you slipped! Oh!" And he's like making up all these like things to try to save himself, to make himself look good. And it sucks because his arc didn't actually happen. While he was talking to the hobo and saying things, he's kind of like, he says this thing where he's like, maybe people aren't just good and bad. Maybe some good people just do bad things and then they need to, make up for it and stuff like that. And then he does a bad thing and then he's like, oh, that's not what happened. You slipped. And I'm like, oh, God. So he learned nothing. And then what happens is the mother, the crazy lady, is still alive too somehow. And then she gets up, literally grabs AJ's face and just jams her thumbs into his eyeballs and wrecks his face. So, yeah, he's dead. And he learned nothing. And that's what I'm saying. These characters don't have actual arcs. It's kind of weird. And then she looks at Tess and she's like trying to like take her back to her tunnel. And then Tessa's like, no, I can't. And she's like in pain because she got shot. And then luckily the gun is like right next to her because it like fell out of just AJ's hands. And then so the mom is like trying to take her back. And then she takes the gun and puts it up to the mom's face. And I kind of liked how when she puts the gun up to the lady's face, she doesn't react to it because she doesn't know what it is. She doesn't know what the gun is. She doesn't realize that it could possibly hurt her. So she's just putting the gun up to her face, and then she shoots and kills the monster lady by shooting her in the head. And then Tess gets up. Now, she's still shot, by the way, and she just fell off a water tower. And she gets up, and she just starts walking away, and then the movie ends. And I'm like, this movie was good. It had a lot of tension. It was well shot. It had decent characters I actually liked, especially Tess. Tess is a good final girl in this movie because she was smart from the beginning of the movie and genuinely a good person. But this movie just felt like a bunch of events that happened with no real purpose. They kind of, at the beginning, do this thing where they're like, oh, the difference between how men and women react to certain situations and stuff like that. But then it just goes off in this crazy... I think they wanted to do like a crazy big twist and subvert expectations. But they went so far with it that it totally eclipsed any of the prior messaging that they had in the first act of the film. After Keith dies and then AJ finds out about everything, and that you just totally forget about the first act of the movie and all of that little banter that Keith and Tess had. That was really good banter and very good conversations, and then it's completely forgotten because you just watch this giant incest baby attack them. And you find out about this horrible dude who's done horrible, disgusting things, and your brain is just like, I completely forget everything before this. Now I'm on this. And I kind of forgot about AJ's whole case thing too. Like anything before finding out about that, I kind of forgot because at that point, the shock is just too much. You're like, oh God, this dude's horrible. This situation is horrible. And then the movie just ends. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts on the movie. If y'all liked it, that's awesome. If you want to check out the movie, I suggest checking it out because it is a good movie. It's just really weird. Just be prepared, that's what you're getting into. But the movie is well directed, and maybe they could do some sort of sequel. Maybe they could bring Tess back and have her, have some sort of PTSD or something from this, and then have her have to deal with something else and give her like a character flaw to work with. Other than that, though, I don't really know what else they could do. I think this is probably going to be a one-off horror movie You know, maybe they could create another horror movie that's kind of in the same universe, but I don't think they will. But yeah, so leave your comments down below, leave your thoughts, and yeah, that's it. That's what I think about it. So everyone, have a good day.